Handstands are a journey on their own. The press handstand is an elusive, floaty feeling of entering a handstand with little momentum and getting used to that feeling of shifting the weight from our feet into the upper body, particularly the wrist flexors and the shoulders. It is a beautiful entryway into handstand, and there's a reason why it's called the quest for the press. Today, I will walk you through the pike press handstand, which is probably one of the most difficult press handstand variations. It took me about a year and a half since getting my first press handstand to finally achieve the pike press handstand. And I wasn't clear about setting that goal right away. I just kept working on foundational drills. Foundational drills being compression, shoulder mobility and strength, hip mobility, hip strength, particularly in the hip flexors, hamstring strength, and again, being able to compress my body into a stacked position. A lot of the times, people focus a lot on core strength when really it is a total body experience and learning how to work with our breath to get up into the press. So if you're starting your press handstand journey, I am so thrilled for you, and it is going to teach you a lot of great lessons. If you haven't done so already, please go ahead and hit the like and subscribe button, and we'll get started today. As always, please make sure that your body is warmed up before attempting this tutorial. So the pike press handstand is a little more challenging than the straddle press handstand, simply because our legs are stacked together and the legs are moving away from our center of gravity. The straddle press is a really nice way to learn the patterning of your body, of being able to shift your hips over the shoulders. And too often, the pike press handstand or any kind of press handstand variation emphasizes on that lean in. But the problem is, the more you lean forward, the more you have to send the shoulders back on top of the wrists. So I highly don't recommend focusing on the shift forward too much. And if you are afraid of shifting the shoulders a little bit, don't worry. You can follow my class on all of my press handstand drills in the link in the description box below, as well as find my compression drills. So for the pike press handstand, a useful way of building compression into the position is to come into a Paschimottanasana, point out through your feet, and then you're going to hinge from your hips forward. But instead of holding this passively, you want to imagine as if there is a wall in front of you and push through the shoulders. And in this way, you're simulating that stacked position needed to enter the pike press handstand. Now, it's going to take a lot of time in developing this range of motion. And don't worry about it. Just go at your own pace and listen to your body, and don't over push it, because as I always say, the wrists are vulnerable joints and it takes time to build up strength and mobility into the wrists in particular. And when it comes to the press handstands, the tendency is to get very excited about learning it and then end up injuring our wrists or trapezius muscles in the back body. So we want to avoid that at all costs. And a great way to get the patterning into the body is this drill called the press walk. So you're going to start out in a forward fold. And if your hamstrings are tight, you could always do this drill with bent legs. You're going to place your hands in front of you. Then you're going to come up high on the tips of your toes and then float the feet and land the feet lightly. You want to land the feet so that the feet don't make a sound as soon as they land on the ground. And this is a great drill for teaching the patterning into your body, and as well as getting your body used to the demands that we're imposing on it. But of course, if you go forward, it really helps to go back, because that's going to help you, especially with the pike press handstand, is to be able to Send the feet back lightly with control. And don't worry, when you first start learning this, your feet might clonk on the ground, but trust me, we've all started somewhere in our journeys, and it happens to each and every single one of us. And what's important is to not be discouraged at all. Know that this journey takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of strength to build into the body. Now, having said that, proportions are something to consider as well, because we all have our own unique bodies. We're all built in a biomechanical way that is unique. And people who are taller will probably struggle to press handstand, whereas I am 5'4", and I think that I have a easier time into getting the press, even though it's certainly not easy at all. But I think that from my experience in comparing people who are taller than me, and that's understood because my center of gravity is closer to me, whereas for taller individuals, their center of gravity is further away from them. So we all have different time frames into getting the press. So don't be discouraged about having to reach a certain month or whatnot. Please just go at your own pace and spend some time doing the drills in the link in the description below. So to enter the pike press handstand, you're going to start out in a forward fold at the top of the mat. Now, one of the biggest mistakes I see in the pike press handstand or any press handstand variation is that people practice it with their hands way forward. And the problem about this distance between the feet and the wrists is that it's just going to get you to expend a lot of energy. And one of the most important aspects of any kind of press handstand practice is to be able to be efficient with our energy reserve, because there's only a finite amount that the brain can handle, especially when we're taking on new challenges and learning new skills. So my suggestion is to keep your feet closer than you think. And this also applies for the straddle press handstand as well, and the tuck press handstand too, because in that way, your shoulders don't have to travel too far forward and too far back as you lift your hips up towards the sky. I like to measure the distance of my feet a half hand distance apart, if that makes any sense. So I'm taking my hand, measuring what the half of the hand is. Okay, I got that measurement. I'm going to walk my feet a little bit closer. And I'm using a Lifeform mat. And what's nice about the Lifeform mat is that it has a great grip, especially if you're practicing press handstands. And it also has these alignment lines as well, just to get your body used to the measurements. I find it to be very helpful in my practice. So you might find that helpful as well. And by the way, that is not a sponsored plug. I am a true fan of Lifeform. So anyway, we're starting out in this forward fold, and take a couple of bounces between the midsection to the thighs. Because being able to have a forward fold is one of the key components into any kind of press handstand. So I'm going to place my arms down. I'm going to gaze in the space between my wrists or thumbs. That's really important. You don't want to let your gaze travel towards the top of the mat. Otherwise, you're just going to be entering an arm balance transition. And for our purpose of today, we really want to focus on getting the alignment of the hips over the shoulders, shoulders over the wrists. So take a moment to breathe here. Focus on connecting your thighs to your belly. Take an inhale to come up onto the toes. Exhale. Lift your legs up. Stay active in the legs. Bring your shoulders back over the wrists. And you could come into a tuck handstand shape. Make sure that the shoulders are over the wrists Keep pushing the ground away. And then lower down with control. And I'm pretty shocked at myself because that was the first time I was able to talk doing that transition. So thank you for bearing with me. I hope that made sense. Another great way into developing the movement into the body is to focus on the negatives. And the negatives are the ability to lower your legs down from a handstand or jumping from downward facing dog into the top of the mat, the float, but slowing down the lowers. And that's called the negative. And the benefit of that is we teach our body how to contract the muscles that is required for bringing the legs and the hip flexors up. You always want to think up, up, up in the press handstands. So a great drill to work on getting that patterning into the body as well is to start from downward facing dog. And you could start with a shortened downward facing dog. I find this to be more accessible, especially when you're first learning the patterning. So you're going to inhale, lift the heels, bend the legs. Then you're going to find a 7 shape or pike handstand. Focus on the posterior tilt. And then as you lower down, slowly lower, lower, lower. And practicing that several times a day is not only going to help your negatives, it's also going to benefit your floating to the top of the mat. And it's also going to show up in different areas of your practice. So learning how to get that patterning right and training your eyes to focus on the space between your wrists and thumbs. Because unless you're jumping into an arm balance, you would typically shift your gaze towards the top of the mat or further. Our eyes direct our body. Our body will follow the direction of our eyes. And that is something really important to remember because you don't want to fall too far forward because, again, the wrists take time to develop that strength and mobility. So we'll do that again. Come into a short and downward facing dog. And gaze between your wrists or your thumbs, whatever feels more comfortable for you. And remember when we're coming into that 7 shape, try to focus on creating a posterior pelvic tilt as opposed to an anterior pelvic tilt. And to remember that is, this is the anterior pelvic tilt, this is posterior, this is neutral. Always really important to play around with the pelvic tilts because a large part of our yoga practice is about where your pelvis is in space. And if you really put that into consideration, you'll notice a lot of things in your practice and in the practice of your friends. So take an inhale to lift the heels, bend the legs, gaze between the wrists, hop, hold, point out through the toes, and then posterior tilt. Lower down, push the ground away. Another important tip in pressing into handstand is honing in onto the breath for us to get that power and control. So whenever I press up into a handstand or jump into a handstand, I always do so on the exhale. Because when you exhale, your core contracts. All the muscles that are required for handstand positions contract as well. It will be very, very difficult to press up into a handstand on an inhale. So I'll show that to you one last time. And a good way that I like to test whether my hamstrings and quads are working is I like to lift the toes up, press my heels down, and then just feel your hamstrings and quads activated because we want your adductors to be on fire, your inner thighs. And when I come onto my toes, I'm thinking up, up, up with the legs. So my heels are driving up towards the sky. It's important to stay active in the feet because if we're not active in the feet, then we lose the integrity of the lower body. So take an inhale here. then come up onto your toes. Exhale, kick your feet up, 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 point out through the feet. Posterior tilt of the pelvis. Get your shoulders over the wrists. Keep pushing the ground away. And then control the negative, control the lowers by pushing the ground and release. I hope that this tutorial has been helpful for you. Thank you so much for tuning in and supporting the page. Check out the description box for all of my drills, all of the flows that will help you work on that hamstring mobility, compression, shoulder mobility, as well as shoulder strength, and the wrist flexor strength as well, not to be discounted. Thank you.